Hey Magic players, this is Ben with MTGFrontierGuide, and today we're doing a deck tech for Abzan Revolting Servos. Okay, we're going to start the deck out with our Servo Makers. We've got 4 Hidden Stockpiles, which lets you pay 1 mana, sacrifice a creature, and scry 1, and then it has Revolt. So if you had a permanent leave the battlefield during your turn, on your end step you get to put a 1/1 Servo into play. Hopefully we can get a couple of these out and start putting multiple servos out in a turn. We're also running 2 animation modules, so whenever we put a +1/+1 counter on a creature, we can pay 1 mana and we can put a 1/1 servo into play. Now to work with our servos, we're running 4 copies of Metallic Mimic, and we'll name Servo as the creature type when it enters the battlefield, and whenever another servo enters the battlefield, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on it. To work with those +1/+1 counters, we also have 2 Hardened Scales in the deck, and so whenever a +1/+1 counter would be placed on a creature we control, we get to put that many +1. So whenever we make a servo at the end of the turn with the Hidden Stockpile, the Metallic Mimic puts a +1/+1 counter on it, and the Hardened Scales adds an extra one, so we actually get a 3/3 servo at the end of the turn if we have those 3 cards out at the same time. Next up, we'll cover some of the creatures with Revolt from the deck. We've got 4 copies of Narnam Renegade. It's a 1-drop, 1/2 with Death Touch, and its Revolt allows it to enter the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it, which obviously works well with the Hardened Scales if we have one on the battlefield. And then we have 3 copies of Greenwheel Liberator, and it's a 2-drop, 2/1. Its Revolt allows it to enter the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. And then we have 3 copies of Countless Gears Renegade. It's a 2-drop, 2/2, and its Revolt allows us to create a 1/1 servo creature token. So once again, just kind of tying everything together with the Revolt and the servos. Now we also have 4 copies of Renegade Rallier. Renegade Rallier is a 3-drop, 3/2, and its Revolt, when it enters the battlefield, you get to return a permanent from your graveyard with the converted mana cost of 2 or less. So this can be any of the creatures, that we've already mentioned. It can be an animation module or Hidden Stockpile if you happen to have any of those in the graveyard, or it can even be one of the fetch lands to bring it back, get another land, trigger Revolt. And we'll finish up our creatures with 3 copies of Vengeful Rebel. It's a 3-drop, 3/2, and its Revolt allows us to give a target creature an opponent controls -3, -3 until the end of turn. So on turn 3, we can crack a fetch land, we can play this, and we can kill whatever they have on the other side of the battlefield, as long as it it doesn't have over a 3 toughness. And next up, we have 2 copies of Evolutionary Leap. It's a 2-drop enchantment. It has the ability of paying 1 green mana, sacrificing a creature, and then we reveal cards from the top of the library until we reveal a creature card, and we put that card into our hand, and the rest go on the bottom of the library in a random order. So this is very good to sacrifice servos, so we can go get our actual creatures out of the deck. It's also very good to be able to sack a creature in response to a removal spell. It's very good against control. And then if we're sacking servos, if we've got a Hidden Stockpile out, we get to go get a creature card, and at the end we get to actually replace that servo with another servo. Or 2 if we have multiple, or 3, or however many Hidden Stockpiles we have on the battlefield at the time. We also have 2 copies of Oath of Ajani. We're just using this to put +1/+1 counters on each of our creatures we control. We don't have any planeswalkers to take advantage of the second ability, but if we do have a board full of creatures, it's very nice to be able to put the extra +1/+1 counters on there, especially if we have a Hardened Scales in play, so we can put the additional +1 counters as well. And that brings us to the last non-land card in the deck, which is going to be 4 copies of Fatal Push, which is obviously one of the best removal spells in the entire format. It's a 1-drop, it destroys a creature with converted mana cost 2 or less, or if you have Revolt, which is pretty easy in this deck, it destroys a creature if it has converted mana cost 4 or less. Okay, now we're going to move into our mana base. We're going to start out with 4 copies of Wooded Foothills, 4 copies of Bloodstained Mire, and 3 copies of Windswept Heath. And our dual lands that we can grab with our fetch lands are going to be 1 copy of Smoldering Marsh, 1 copy of Cinder Glade, and 2 copies of Canopy Vista. We're also running a few fast lands. We have 2 copies of Concealed Courtyard and 1 copy of Blooming Marsh. And we'll finish up the deck with 2 basic forest, 2 basic swamp, and 1 basic plains. Now, as usual, your sideboard will be dependent on what you're expecting to face at your local game shop with your local meta. If you're having trouble getting rid of some problematic creatures, you might want to bring in some extra removal spells. Some of the ones that I've used in my sideboard have been Declaration in Stone, Collective Brutality, Into the Slaughter, and then Hallowed Moonlight is another good one to bring in against other, like, Coco decks or Rally decks or something like that. So there's a bunch of different options. Obviously, you can bring in like Tormod's Crypt if they're using some kind of graveyard shenanigans. With the Abzan colors, you actually have quite a few choices available for your sideboard. And that's our video for Abzan Revolting Servos. I want to thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Leave us a comment if you build it. Let me know if you had fun playing it. As much fun as I've had playing it. So now get out there, play some Magic, and have some fun.